I want to talk to you now about 5 main features of the ethics of care, and these come out of chapter 1 of Held's book, which is called The Ethics of Care as Moral Theory. And these 5 features, the first one is that Held is convinced of the moral relevance of attending to and meeting the needs of particular others whom we take responsibility for. And so she wants to focus our attention on meeting the needs of the dependent, the people who depend upon us. And that's in contrast to traditional ethics, which tends to treat the individual as independent, rational, autonomous, and Held wants to say instead, no, we need to pay attention to the obligations of care that we have to others, regardless of any universal rules. Okay, so that's number one, the moral relevance to meeting the needs, the moral relevance of meeting the needs of particular others. Number two, the ethics of care values emotion rather than rejecting it. And there's a particular range of emotions that the ethics of care is particularly concerned with. Emotions like sympathy, empathy, sensitivity, responsiveness, solidarity, trust, loyalty, considerateness, attentiveness, and a word that she uses, that Held uses, an expression, narrative nuance. Now, she doesn't stop and say exactly what she means by narrative nuance, but I think I know what she means by it, which is paying attention to where someone is in their particular life story. So, for instance, if you're a parent and or you have nieces and nephews, and one of them is 3 or 4, and they ask you for information about something. They say, "Hey, what does this do? What is this about? Give me this piece of knowledge." You may simply give it to them, offer it to them as a gift. But 10 years old, 11 years old, if you're a good parent or a good aunt or uncle, when that child again asks you a question seeking some kind of knowledge, you're probably going to say something like, "Let me help you find that piece of information for yourself. Let me help you understand where you can find that information for yourself." That's an example of narrative nuance, where you pay attention to the relevant differences between what someone needs at one point in their life story or another point in their life story, even at one point in their day or at another point in their day. So, not if someone has a stressful job and a stressful commute, maybe not bringing up the most difficult thing you have to talk about with them the moment they get home, but giving them a little while to relax and unwind before they're ready for that difficult conversation. I'm sure you can think of many, many different examples of narrative nuance. Now, Held wants us not only to use emotions like that list of that range of emotions that I listed in deciding on our moral values. Of course, she wants us to use them when we're deciding on particular actions, but she also wants us to cultivate those emotions in ourselves as a part of our relational capacities. She also wants us to cultivate these in other people, right? Educate other people about the value of those emotions and help to nurture those emotions, those relational capacities in others. A third component or aspect of the ethics of care is an avoidance of the universal, or the universalistic at least, and the abstract. And so mainstream moral theories, or dominant moral theories as Held calls them, tend to try to be as abstract and universal as they can in order to avoid bias, in order to be impartial. But the ethics of care wants to question that, to interrogate that, and to say, is it the case that we should be as universalistic and as abstract in formulating our moral theories as we possibly can? Because the ethics of care respects the claims of particular others whom we are actually in relationship with. It emphasizes care, friendship, loyalty. It acknowledges the fact that not all of our relationships are chosen, not all of them are exercises in our autonomy. Some of our relationships are thrust upon us, right? Our relationship with our parents is thrust upon us. A parent may have a child, let's say, who is disabled, and they chose to have a child, but they didn't specifically choose to have a disabled child, unless they adopted one, knowing that the child was disabled. But they stand in a relationship that has obligations of care, whether they chose that particular relationship or not. And so, in light of some considerations like that, the ethics of care actually wants to make the claim, or Held wants to make the claim on behalf of the ethics of care, that ethical theory becomes less adequate and less reliable the more general and the more abstract it is. And according to Held, it has to do that in order to pay attention to the cooperative well-being of those we're in relationship with, and to the well-being, the health of the relationship itself. Now, with all of this very positive talk about relationships, it may seem like Held has put relationships up on a pedestal. So you might think, well, if we're in a relationship, we should never try to change the relationship substantially or end the relationship. So Held would want us to stay cemented in all of our relationships. And that's precisely what she does not mean. She does want to emphasize the importance of the relationships that we're in. But she also wants us to reflect on those relationships and the conditions of those relationships, to ask where our relationships need to be revised and transformed, and where, in fact, we may need to end, to step out of a particular relationship in order to preserve our capacity to carry out other relationships that are more valuable, let's say. And to ask ourselves what new relationships should be formed. Also, as a part of this third feature, Held's ethics of care has one major thing in common with John Stuart Mill's utilitarianism, and that is that both the ethics of care and utilitarianism are not just about the individual and the actions that she undertakes, not even just about individual lives. The ethics of care and utilitarianism are both agendas for social reform, right? They want to change the societies that we live in through common effort. Think back to Mill and the removable causes of unhappiness, education, poverty, disease, lack of education, poverty, disease, and vicissitudes of fortune, or what we now call bad luck. And Held wants to say that the focus of our society, the masculinist focus of our society, and all of the different implications that it has, are things that through cooperative effort we should try to change. So I'm going to cover the fourth and fifth special characteristics of the ethics of care in the next video.